Hey everybody, welcome to Jets Talk Now. I'm Paul Fiore and my first ever live. Wanted to come on and try something a little different. Typically I do recorded shows and have very specific topics that I go through and cover. And today I thought it might be fun to do something a little bit different where we can have more of a wide-ranging conversation. And if you join and you have some thoughts that you want to kind of talk about or just ask questions and talk through, ideas about the team, the coaching staff, the draft, free agency, let's have that discussion. Be a lot of fun. For me, as this is kind of a dead week in general, I just try to pay attention to kind of sources and things that I trust. And there's a lot of silliness at this time of the season. In general, you're going to see the Jets tied to every single, possible draft pick. You're going to read every single one of these guys are, the Jets are doing diligence on, David Bailey. You saw that today. Orville Reese. Should they draft Caleb Downs? There's going to be lots of those conversations. And that'll get louder and louder as we get to the combine and then through the combine. I remember distinctly last year, the Jets were tied to, I don't know how many different quarterbacks, and they wound up not drafting one, right? I remember reading they would be interested in potentially, moving up for Jackson Dart, coming back into the first round for him. They really were doing diligence in Tyler Shuck, and there was constant different rumors around who they might be interested in. And ultimately they didn't make those decisions. So, I think what we'll see is the same old. And, sometimes when I post stuff on X, I'll hear from people, lots of, comments around why do you even entertain these things? Well, I mean, it's entertainment. I mean, that's why. I mean, at the end of the day, social media has to be treated, I feel, as a fan and I guess a content creator, as a platform to have fun and engage with people. And sometimes that engagement is, not in the realm of possible. And sometimes it is, things that, could happen. And so I view it as, until we know for sure what's going on, if I see something from, people that I've engaged with in the past that seem like it could be potentially a possibility, I'm gonna have fun with it. So, I posted a mock draft this morning with the Jets making a trade for Fernando Mendoza. Do I think that's going to happen? Absolutely not. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's anywhere in the realm of possible. I mean, I think on a scale of, 0% chance to 100% chance that they would make that trade, they would 100% make the trade that I put out there. The chance that the Raiders make that trade or make a trade in general is probably less than 10. You don't go and get Kubiak as your head coach. You've got Tom Brady, who they're not the same prospect, but there's a mentality between him and Mendoza that's very similar, that I feel like Tom Brady is he's going to be enamored by this kid. So I don't see a world where, Mendoza gets traded. Now, with that said, is there logic behind potentially trading him and getting more draft capital and fixing all of their holes? Of course. I mean, if the Jets had the number one pick in the draft, there would be plenty of people, fans and media alike, that would question whether they should trade the pick, because, when you can amass 2 or 3 first-round picks for the number one pick, knowing that the following year there's going to be significant quarterback possibilities in the first round, you entertain this in conversation. You just do. And so you know, again, do I think the Jets will engage the Raiders? Yes, 100%. Will we hear about that? 100%. Because the Raiders aren't going to just come out and say we're picking Mendoza. That's not going to happen. So you're gonna, if you're smart, you're gonna let this go. And if somebody makes a grandfather offer that you can't refuse, a godfather offer, I should say, that you can't refuse, then the Raiders might do it. Anyway, in my mind, what would be okay if I was the Jets making a trade for Mendoza is swapping ones this year, the 33rd or 44th pick this year, and then a first next year, ideally the worst of the three. That's, to me, where I would probably land the plane there and not make any more. I wouldn't go above and beyond that. From a value perspective, we're actually slightly overpaying, but in a draft where there's only one QB1, to me, it makes sense. Now, the other day I had Will Parkinson on from Badlands, and we had a pretty extensive conversation around whether the Jets should draft Ty Simpson. And I've been pretty adamant that I am not a big, I've watched a lot of Ty Simpson during the season. The first half of the year, the kid played really well. To be fair, I had him as my 1B behind Mendoza at the time. As the season progressed, he obviously fell off pretty hard, and then he got injured, so I don't really hold the last game of the season against him. But my perspective on Ty Simpson is less about him and whether he can become a good NFL quarterback, because I do think Ty Simpson has the possibility to become a good NFL quarterback in the right structure, with the right support, in the right environment. And that I question with the Jets. Yes, we have Frank Reich now. We have Musgrave right now. So we have guys that have experience with young quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks. But I'm questioning whether the timing to bring in someone like a Ty Simpson, which will probably have to be a 16th pick, makes any sense, because I don't think it does. The Jets need players that are going to impact the game now. Aaron Glenn is fighting for his job. I believe people will say, well, they need to draft Ty Simpson because if they draft him, and he turns out to be a good player, you've now cemented your future. And, Will was saying something similar to that. He's like, well, look, if you draft Ty Simpson and he turns out to be somebody, even if you only win 6 games this year, you've got your quarterback for the future. And now you have 3 first-round picks in 2027. True. But that means you're playing Ty Simpson way sooner than I think he should be getting played. And I don't think if you play him at that point that he's going to be the next Jackson Dart. I mean, people are comparing them, and I don't see the comparison. Jackson Dart had more than 40 college starts in his career. 15 starts for Ty Simpson is nowhere near the equivalent. I mean, it's almost a full 2 seasons different in how much time he played. It's the reason why I didn't want the Jets to get Dante Moore and was happy he went back to school. The history of these guys, aside from the Cam Newtons, which are really rare, is that they don't work out. And the Jets are not in a position to take that type of swing. Like, I don't think Aaron Glenn's in that. He won 3 games last year. To me, what Aaron Glenn needs to do is get really good football players that can impact your team now. And again, I've had this debate with my, with guests, Frankie V or Will, the timeline for where the Jets are right now as an organization versus where I think Aaron Glenn is and his timeline are not aligned 100%. I'm worried personally that the Jets will make panic moves to try to save jobs. I'm worried even that Woody gets impatient on his entire rebuild and tells him to go out and get Kyler Murray, who I am adamantly against. This needs to be built the right way. So if you're not getting Fernando Mendoza, as we should assume, My position with the Jets right now is just go out and get really good football players that will impact your team now, right? So at 2, you have Arvil Reese, you have Bailey, and I think those are really the 2. I know, we talk about Bain. I think that Bain has fallen back on this a little bit. And then you have Caleb Downs. And it's funny. I've done so many mocks. I think I've lost track at this point. Because what I wanted to do with this is I've mocked these guys to try to figure out if I drafted Caleb Downs, who I think is a fantastic football player, at 2, what does that leave me when I get to 16, 33, and 44? And could I get a safety later that would be a very good football player at 33 or 44, or even maybe later, that would, that difference between that player and Downs, is it worth it versus passing up on a Bailey or an Arvil Reese? And I think that's the problem for me right now. In an ideal situation, the Jets, if they can't go to 1, would trade down from 2, in my mind, to like 4 with Saleh. And then you get extra draft capital, and you could justify a Caleb Downs at, let's say, 4. But if you can't trade down, the battle for me in my head is, do you take Arvil Reese's versatility and upside? He's only 20 years old. Or do you go with the David Bailey, with the Bailey of the world, who's, would be your number 1 edge rusher? And I know we have Will McDonald and JJ, but McDonald they're not the same player. McDonald is terrible on the run, and I don't think David Bailey's terrible on the run. He's not great, but he's a guy that will play a lot, and he's a guy that will, I think, impact the game at a very high level. Arvil Reese, you're kind of drafting the high-end upside of him. You're kind of projecting a bit. And it's interesting because I wonder where Aaron Glenn is in this and what he thinks. But, I've seen guys like Connor Rogers and others talk at length that they're big David Bailey guys. He mocked them there today. I watched their mock, and they had David Bailey going at 2. I'm not there yet. I don't have a final view of, should it be David Bailey? Should it be Arvil Reese? Could it be Bain? I don't think it'll be Bain. I still think, really, ultimately, I'd love to see them trade down if they can't trade up. So that's where I am with 2. I think it's 16. If Lemon is there, if Tate is there, or Jordan Tyson's there, I think you run the card up for any one of those 3 guys. I think no matter what, this is my problem. If Lemon, Tate, or Tyson are there at 16, and the Jets go and reach for Simpson, that's when I get really frustrated and I'll get pissed off, because that feels desperate to me. You can't convince me that the Jets would love Simpson that much that they would pass on one of those wide receivers for him. Now, again, context is everything. If the wide receivers are gone and you're sitting at 16, what do? I saw a mock where they had them take an offensive lineman. I don't want to take another offensive lineman in the first round. We've done this dance for so many years. The Jets have invested so much in that offensive line over the last, 3 to 5 years. It's just kind of crazy. To me, if you are at 16, is Sonny Styles there? Because if you can't get the wide receivers and Styles is sitting there at 16, then I'm looking at Styles. If not, instead of drafting a Simpson at 16, again, I might try to trade down if possible and accumulate more draft capital. Right? I'm not reaching for the quarterback. Now, if you tell me Simpson's going to be there at 33 or 44, I might be interested in that conversation because it's a lot less risky. your guaranteed dollars are significantly less. At 16, you're guaranteeing him $22 million. And I just think that's just too much money for a guy that you don't know is going to work out. But if you're drafting him at 33 or 44 in the second round and he doesn't work out, you're fine. Like, you go into 2027 and you can still go get your quarterback. I just feel like if you draft him at 16, doing right by that kid would mean that he does not see the field until maybe the final couple of games of the season. You will not have a fair read on whether he is or is not going to be any good as your QB1. And now you're going to go into 2027 with maybe new coach and a guaranteed contract with Ty Simpson. And what do you do? So I'm not there. Again, if you tell me you can get him at 33 or 44, I wouldn't be mad. Is it what I want to do? No, I don't. I really don't. I don't want to draft a quarterback not named Fernando Mendoza in the first 2 rounds. No. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear your comment, and we can have this discussion. So this comment from Chris, which is great. I appreciate the comment, Chris. Thank you very much. I try on my channel to be measured and level-headed with what I'm saying. I try to take my personal bias and opinions and put them aside sometimes. It'll always come through in live reactions or post-game reactions or things that they do that will infuriate me. But like when it comes to like Aaron Glenn, it's one of the most polarizing conversations this year is Aaron Glenn and whether he should or shouldn't have gotten a second year. If you follow me on X, when the Jets were 0-7, I said, if the Jets finish with 2 wins or 3 wins, I don't see how you can bring him back. And now they finished with 3 wins and they brought him back. How am I now sitting here backtracking on that? Well, again, context is everything. They were 0-7. They traded Q. They traded Sauce. So for me at that point, I saw that and said, they're already committing to a second year with him. So why am I going to lose energy, waste energy on a battle that's not possible? Aaron Glenn did not earn a second season. What he earned was an extremely hot seat going into year 2. But the minute you made those trades, you signaled as a franchise that he's getting a second season. That's just the reality of it. And the truth is, there were 10 openings this year? If the Jets job opened and you had the second pick with no real path to a QB, you would have been one of the worst jobs open this year, if not the worst job. I mean, I guess maybe Cleveland's the worst job, but they're close. And so who would you have gotten in that situation? Now, I know you can't say, well, you don't know, because maybe would he be willing to throw a boatload and all kinds of control? I just don't see it, right? So I'm actually not upset that Glenn's getting a second year, because I saw that telegraphed after they made those trades. Now, my issue with Glenn for the vast majority of the first half of the season was he was acting like an ass. And it's one thing to be difficult with the media. Like, he comes from the Parcells school of thought, which is fine. But but to me, or the Bill Belichick mindset, but to me, it's like, you came in here, they rolled out the red carpet. And I'm an Aaron Glenn. I like Aaron Glenn. So I just want to be very clear. I didn't want him as the coach, but when they made the decision to hire him, I was supporting him. They rolled out the red carpet, right? They brought the old Jets players back. Woody went to the podium. We got our guy. They made a big deal about it. And he goes up there and he talks about, we're built for this. And he set expectations incorrectly too high for year 1. That doesn't mean he needed to come in here and say, we're in a rebuild, it's going to be a difficult time, blah, blah, blah. But, whether it was the introductory press conference, whether it was when he met with the media at the combine, whether it was, during training camp, there was a constant narrative around how bad the previous regime was at coaching and how bad Justin Fields had been coached, right? Like when they made the decision to bring in Fields, if you remember correctly, Glenn was saying, we believe he can be, he's going to be quarterback. He's going to get to play the position. And it was as an insinuation as if he had not been coached up to be QB1 at the level they thought he could be. When you put that type of target on your back as the head coach, and you saw it in player interviews, they were all saying the same thing. You leave yourself wide open for what happened to him, which was a complete mutiny on the fan base's part, right? And again, he was completely indignant with the press for such a long period of time. Now, towards the end of the season, it completely changed. But look, I'm no fan of, in general, Jets media. They have a tendency to be a bit fatalistic. But I didn't think the questions he were being asked was unfair. I really didn't. In fact, I thought for the most part, they treated him with kid gloves. And he just went and, acted. He didn't act with enough humility. I think that's the bottom line. When your team is terrible, you got to just own it. Now, at the end of the season, he did. And maybe he learned a lesson. But whoever was giving him advice during the year, early part of the season, really hurt him. And I think it really it shook the fan base in a way that right now, aside from the fact that this is a team that has not made the playoffs for 15 years, they haven't had a winning season in a decade. They just came off of two of the most disappointing seasons you could possibly have as a Jet fan. As someone who's been a Jet fan my entire life, you can't not look at 2023 and 2024 with nothing but absolute disgust and aggravation. I mean, I was buying I don't buy jerseys. I was buying my jerseys. I was excited. I'll never forget opening night. Rodgers then tears his Achilles. Then we come back in 2024, and I'm thinking we've got this renewed hope. They get off to a 2-1 start. And then 2-3, we fire him. We fire solid. Everything falls apart. When you're in that type of mindset as a fan, coming in here as a first-time head coach and an ex-Jet, man, that was a really tough assignment. That's why I wanted them to get an experienced guy in here. So, what will happen with Glenn this year? I don't know. Did he do the right thing by going and becoming the play caller on defense? Yes. He should not have hired Wink Martindale. That would have been a bad hire. If he couldn't get Jim Leonard, then the best thing he could do is call his own plays. Why? Because you got to go with what you know. If you're going to go down with the ship as the guy calling the plays and making the decisions. He brought in guys that I think he feels philosophically will align with him. He brought in Dunbar, which is a really good hire. Make the defense acceptable, get them to the, out of the cellar, make them a mid-tier defense. You can do that in between free agency and the draft if he's a decent play caller, which we'll see if he does a decent job. And you have a path to eventually not being the play caller because you brought in Duker and these other guys who can learn under you and eventually take over. I think that's fine. On offense, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. I see a comment on the live. I think he made the decision to pull the cord on Tanner because he's trying to save his ass. And the best way he knew how to do that is bring in a guy he can trust. If he's going to be so focused on the defense and calling plays, he needs a guy on offense. And I thought, Connor Hughes and others have said this, a head coach of the offense. He brought in Frank Reich. Now, Frank Reich's 64 years old. He's been around forever. He then brings in a QB coach. And I have no problem with this because I hated the Charles London move. But when you bring in Musgrave, he's been around since Jeff George was in the NFL. Okay. You've got a ton of experience there. He's entrusting that these guys with all this experience can right the ship. Okay. And, what does it mean? Well, let's look at Chris, right? Chris said success under Wright hinges on if he can modernize his approach enough, maximize the talent on the roster, and have a tailored, adaptable system and player-centric approach, not a rigid scheme, right? And he follows up, keep Brees, retain him. He can be a great weapon under Reich. Usage, utilizing passing game, not just out of backfield, get running backs in space. Brees can be dangerous with wide zone scheme outside. Yeah, we agree on that. I'll talk about Brees in a second. But, with Reich specifically, he has a type at quarterback, right? He does. He has a type. His type is more of a, people say a pocket passer, non-athletic quarterback. I don't think it's necessarily whether the guy's non-athletic or not. It's more or less what, he likes the taller, 6'2" or taller quarterback who stands in the pocket. He's athletic enough, he's mobile enough, but he's not a guy who's a run first. He goes through his progressions. He finds the weakness in the defense and sees what's open and takes advantage. That's what he likes. So he wants somebody with, the smarts and the IQ to be able to read the defense and play well. And he's had success there, Reich. Where he's not had success is with the run first, Bryce Young type style quarterback. And so that's why when I hear people talk about Kyler Murray, I think it's pure insanity. I don't think Frank Reich came here with the idea that Kyler Murray is going to be his quarterback. Listen, Frank Reich doesn't need the job, and he's friends with Glenn, but he's not coming in here to just be a patsy and just not be able to run his system. So I think he's going to want a quarterback that can run his system, but I agree that he needs to be relatively adaptable. What does that mean? I think he needs to have more motion in his offense than he's had, historically speaking. His offenses, he ran a pretty stagnant, no motion offense. Looks a lot similar to kind of the Rodgers-Hackett offense. I think we don't want that, right? We want to see a little bit more creativity. I feel like when you bring in someone like Rex's son, who learned under Ben Johnson, is only 31 years old, I think that's promising to me. We've heard through different sources that he's a big fan of the Ben Johnson style offense. I think Reich is a smart enough man to understand the NFL has changed. He's spent a couple of years now in college. He's been exposed to different things. I think people think he's like a dinosaur and he's just not going to be adaptable is being unfair to who Frank Reich is. Frank Reich's a very good he's a very good coach, right? And again, take your bias of Aaron Glenn and everything else out of the equation. Bringing in Frank Reich was a good decision because he's better. He may not have the ceiling today that like a Tanner Engstrand maybe had a higher ceiling, but the floor on Tanner Engstrand was lower, right? So he's raising the floor. And so what I think is they're going to bring in an experienced veteran quarterback. I'm going to stick with this because I've been saying it for weeks. I think one of the guy that will start at quarterback this year will be a veteran, one of Jacoby Brissett, Kirk Cousins, and I did have Derek Carr in there until I watched him basically have this delusional take that he's going to go play for a team that's competing for a Super Bowl. I mean, it just means he doesn't want to play if that's true, or he thinks he's going to go to Minnesota, which if he did, he'd be a backup. Nobody's going to sign him and make him QB1 for a Super Bowl contending team. It's kind of an insane thought. I think tier 2 of those quarterbacks, and Drew, I see yours on here. I agree. Let's just say what you got here. Big QBs, enough little guys. Give me 6'4", 230. Mentions Jimmy G. Yeah, I think the tier 2s are the Jimmy G's, Marcus Mariotas of the world. People will ask or say, well, what about Malik Willis? Look, I think Malik Willis there's nothing wrong with Malik Willis from his upside talent-wise. Do I think the Jets are going to go and pull another Justin Fields contract in a year that Aaron Glenn needs to win games to keep his job? In a year where the Jets play, I just pulled it up before, the Jets' schedule this year, at home, they play Green Bay, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Bills, the Patriots, the Browns, the Raiders, and the Dolphins. Now, of those home games, the Dolphins should be crap, right? But they're rebuilding, right? They've basically cut a bunch of guys. We'll see what they do at quarterback. The Raiders, we'll see what they are, obviously, once they get Mendoza. And the Browns, they're plucky, but they're bad too. So maybe there's 2 wins in that schedule, if you want to say 2 or 3 wins in that on the home side. On the away side, you've got the Bears, the Lions, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Bills, the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Titans. I think that's it. Yeah. So on the away side, again, who are your possible W's? You got the Dolphins. I'd like to believe Tennessee because I don't think Robert Saleh is a good head coach, but they're going to be better. And you know how it is. The Jets are going to go into Tennessee. It's going to be a revenge game for Saleh. What are the odds that the Jets win that game? The Chargers are going to be better than the Jets. The Chiefs are going to be better than the Jets. The Cardinals, no. So, I mean, maybe you got 2 more wins or 3 more wins there. I mean, the Jets are a 5 or 6. If you just go based on that, they've got a very, very difficult schedule for a team that won 3 games this past year. So, you know, in that situation, again, if Aaron Glenn's fighting for his job, is he going to entrust Malik Willis? First of all, I don't think Malik Willis would want to be a Jet. And it's not because the Jets are terrible and LOL Jets and all that other shit. It's more about, in my mind, the options that he will have and how much money people will guarantee him to be QB1. If the Jets are going to be a rebuilding team and they need a veteran to steady the ship, that's not really Malik Willis. Malik Willis is he's your home run ball. You're taking a swing. And I saw earlier today, people were talking about him maybe getting $35 million a year. Like, you can't do that if you're the Jets. You just can't. Like, you want to tell me he's willing to take a $15 million, $18 million deal? I mean, he's only had 6 games in the NFL. Just of any kind of substance. I don't see it. So I think Malik Willis will wind up in Miami or maybe Arizona or somewhere like that. You know, other than him, Tanner McKee, do we all think that the Jets will, with Aaron Glenn fighting for his job, entrust Tanner McKee with his future? He won't. So that's the thing. These upside guys, Will Levis, that's another name I've heard a bunch of times. You could trade for Will Levis and make him fight for a spot, as QB2. Like, if you tell me your room is going to be, I don't know, Marcus Mariota, Will Levis, and a rookie, okay. I still think the Jets, their biggest swing will probably be for Kirk Cousins. Will he come here? I don't know. But I think that there's a relationship between Reich and Cousins. He will be guaranteed QB1. He's a professional who knows how to play the position. He'll understand Reich's, system. I could see that. And he'd be a good mentor for whoever they bring in. I could see Jacoby Brissett being traded for as long as it's reasonable. What's reasonable? 5th round, 6th round pick. People have to remember, Brissett's numbers last year were pretty good. I think the guy's won 3 games in the last 2 years as quarterback. So it's not like he's a winning quarterback. But do I like Jacoby Brissett? Yes, better than anything else they've put out there in the last, year and a half. So I think that's what the plan will be at quarterback. They'll bring in a veteran. Again, I think it's either Brissett or Cousins or probably my tier 1. I'm going to remove Carr from the conversation at this point. I think tier 2 is Jimmy G and Marcus Mariota. If one of those 4 guys is not quarterback, I would be shocked. Okay? I would absolutely be shocked. And then going back to the draft, I do not want to touch a QB in round 1 or 2. Drew, you said, taller guys. Look, Ty Simpson is listed at 6'2". He's probably 6'1", right? I don't hate Ty Simpson. I just don't think there's any one elite skill set that he brings to the table. So I don't want to draft him at 16. I think it's a bad move. So not to beat that horse as much as I already have, but to me, you're better off get the veteran, bring in 2 veterans, and then take a lotto. And Chris, you just posted the same thing. I was about to go. Take a lottery ticket on someone later, around 4 or 5. Drew Aller, polarizing prospect. There are people that can't stand him. They immediately bring up Christian Hackenberg. I don't know why. It's just kind of a weird. It's like when people were bringing up Jackson Dart and Zach Wilson. Drew Aller 6'5", big kid, big arm, a bit inaccurate. Obviously played poorly this year, but why wouldn't you take a swing on a guy that doesn't cost you much, or the 4th or the 5th round? And probably ideal, size wise, and kind of his overall play for a Frank Reich offense. Taylon Green, interesting prospect that's been brought up to me a few times. Frankie Lee brought him up to me. Athletic freak, pretty awful at throwing the football. He's got a kind of a dog mentality, which I love. But you're talking about a guy's a major project, so I don't know if he's a fit or not. I don't like Nussmeier. He's too small. I don't think he has any. I think he's going to get drafted too high. Klubnik doesn't do anything for me. Pavia, keep him far away from this team. I don't know much about Joe Fagano or Fagano, but there's the other kid too. I can't remember his name now. Anyway, I'm good with any of these guys in like 4th round or later, because it doesn't put you in a position where you've committed big money or big draft capital to someone who could become something but maybe doesn't, and who cares? At the end of the day, again, the problem for me is, where is Aaron Glenn? What does Aaron Glenn need to do to have a job going into year 3 that also does not negatively impact what this team is trying to do long term? And so what's an ideal outcome for this year? And, I don't know. What would you say? For me, be punchy. I actually care less about wins and losses and more about being competent and looking like an actual NFL team. I don't know. Win 5. 5 is a little bit low. I think right now, if I look at that schedule and I'm being real, win 6 games. If you go 6-11 and your defense is improved and you got your wide receiver 2 in the draft, Mason Taylor's making strides. Frank Reich's done a nice job. Sean Ryan's shown some interesting things in the passing game. And we know we're basically a QB away from getting back into a world where we can compete for, Bib being a 9-win team. I think he gets a 3rd year. I do. Do I think he survives a 5-win season where it looks a lot like this year, and at the end of the season they're getting their doors blown off? No. I also don't think he survives a 5-win season where they took a swing with Ty Simpson and he sucks. I think that ownership is going to turn around and say, look, we're going to have a top 5 draft pick. We need a quarterback. We need to bring in someone who's an offensive-minded guy to develop the quarterback. So I think Glenn's trying to thread like the tiniest of needle right now to get to year 3, which is why I would be shocked if they didn't bring in a veteran that can man the position for the majority of 2026. And maybe you give your drafted quarterback, the Brady Cook treatment at the end of the season where he plays the final 4 games. I just see there's a comment here from Curtis. Thanks for joining, Curtis. So Curtis, Will Levis, if the Jets signed Levis, there'd be a QB problem because of competition with a drafted QB and storylines in the news. Is that a good problem? It's an interesting question. I think, Curtis, to me, the way I would look at it, first of all, I'm not a Will Levis guy. I get the physical traits. He's a turnover machine. I don't think he's got it up here. He makes a lot of dumb decisions. I don't know if you watch him enough, it's just you wait for him to make the stupid play. I mean, it's just what he is. But if you get Will Levis for, let's say, a 4th round or a 5th round pick, I'm in the position, and you may disagree with me on this. I don't think the Jets should waste a high draft capital on a quarterback. I'm not drafting Ty Simpson. I'm not drafting Nussmeier. I'm not drafting anybody in the first 2 rounds not named Fernando Mendoza. So I don't think, like, if you got Will Levis, right? Let's say your quarter. Let's do this. Your quarterback room next year is Jacoby Brissett, Will Levis, and let's use Drew Aller. I think you're fine. I think you let Drew Aller basically have a redshirt season. See how he looks in practice. If you decide to elevate him, it's because you've got enough. You trust your guys like Reich and Musgrave to say he's ready to go out there and play. But I'm not in that mind frame. Like, for me, the mind frame is Brissett or Cousins, and then I want to bring in Jimmy G or Mariota as a backup, and then I want to draft somebody late like Aller. That's what I like. For me, that would, if I'm Aaron Glenn and I'm trying to save my job, I'm doing that. I'm convincing Kirk Cousins that he should be a Jet. I think he's the best of a bad bunch of options. I think he can win him enough games to save his job. Now, a lot of people are going to say this is where the fan base gets really struggles with this. And as someone who wanted them to tank this year, I struggle with this. What happens if the Jets win 7 games this year because Kirk Cousins is QB1? The defense is a little bit better. And now we're drafting, I don't know, 14th. Let's say 14th, 15th. We're going to be in QB purgatory again. That's what you'll hear from people. It's a fair concern, right? But here's the way I look at it. 2 things. There's like 10 guys in college going into 2026 that could be first-round QBs. Like 10, right? Like, if you look at the list of guys, like Julian Sayin, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, you just go down the list, on and on and on. This is different than this year. I know people expected 25 to be a good draft class. 26 to be a good draft class. And it didn't turn out that way. But Arch stayed in school. Dante Moore stayed in school. Aller got hurt. Klubnik didn't have a good year. I get all of that. But these other guys have shown a lot. And a lot of people are feeling really, really high on these guys. So let's just even say, let's say there's 7 guys. This year's class is so bad that it can't be as bad next year. So if there's, let's call it 5. There's 5 quarterbacks that are worthy of a first-round pick next year. And the Jets have 14. Let's say Dallas is also middle of the road. There's 16 or 17. What are the Colts, right? And so Drew wrote, he's right? He said, not if the Colts get 1.1, right? I mean, the Colts could be awful. Right? I mean, Daniel Jones is coming off of a bad injury. He's probably not going to be ready to start the season. And the way he played last year, is that what he's going to be? The first year off of an Achilles, how is that? It's terrible usually. Kirk Cousins was bad. Rodgers wasn't good. And Daniel Jones is not that pedigree. So it's very possible, Indy's not that good next year. So, what if the Jets have 14, 17, and let's say Indy's a top 10 pick, they're number 7. You mean to tell me if the Jets finish with 7 wins this year, the defense is on the upswing, they've got their wide receiver too, you've got Garrett locked and loaded. I'm going to talk about Breece in a minute. You can't package in a year where everyone's saying not just QB, but multiple positions have high value in 2027. You can't package 2 of those first-round picks to move further up if you need to go from 7 to 4? Of course you can. So I think we need to worry less. This is one of those things where I've been worried about it, but at the end of the day, I'm not. What I'm worried about is trading 2027 draft capital now because you're desperate. Don't do that. Do not do that. Like, if I see them do something stupid and trade away 20, unless you're getting Mendoza, and I know I keep going back to this. If you tell me you can get Mendoza for 33, our second pick this year, 33 or 44 this year, and a first rounder next year, I would be okay. That'd be the only move that I'd be okay, because you still have 2 first-rounders in 27, and you believe you've got your QB1. If you have that much faith in Mendoza, then that's fine. It's not going to happen, but it'd be the only way I would do that. If you don't do that, don't trade any 2027 capital. Don't. Give Glenn the opportunity to get his veteran quarterback in here. Go draft a wide receiver. Do the smart thing in the draft. Do the smart thing in free agency. Don't go, I've seen people talk about, hey, go out and get Pierce and spend $25 million on a wide receiver. No, you're not in that position. You can go draft wide receiver 2 at 16. It doesn't make sense to do that. Yeah, you've got, what is it, roughly 90 million in cap space. 30 million of that, 25 million of that's going to go to the draft. So you're going to have about 60, $65 million to work with. What do? You need linebacker help badly. You need safety help badly. You can't do all of this in the draft. You need D-line help badly, right? What are you going to do with Brees? Well, we'll talk about that here in a second. But you don't do something like give some massive contract to a guy that, is in a way, a luxury position when you're a rebuilding team. It's why I don't want to trade for Joe Burrow. Like people, and not that you ever could, but trading for Joe Burrow is like the craziest thing a team like this could do right now. The Jets are worse than the Bengals, and the Bengals are bad. So trading for Joe Burrow with the team you currently have makes 0 sense. Nor would he want to come here. We are not a quarterback away. You want to get a young rookie quarterback in here that you have control over for 4 or 5 years? Different. That's different. You already are paying Garrett Wilson a boatload of money. Don't create Cincinnati with Chase and Higgins. Don't do that. Go draft a wide receiver 2. Get one of Lemon, Tyson, or Tate. And if those guys are gone, Boston, Surratt, Cooper, those guys are all good players. Fields, not Justin. Like, there's plenty of guys that can be your wide receiver 2. Let A.D. Mitchell be your wide receiver 3, right? And now what do you do with Brees? He's 24 years old. He's a mopey pain in the ass. He is. But you made a decision at the trade deadline to keep him. And keeping Brees Hall at the deadline means he needs to be kept on a tag or an extension now, because you can't let him walk for nothing. That would be terrible roster management on Muji's part. Again, is Brees kind of that old Robert Saleh player where he mopes and post bullshit on social media that drives you crazy? 100%. 100%. Doesn't mean you can't trade him at the deadline if you bring him in on a tag. Like, and why would you create another hole that you would have to fill either in free agency or in the draft? Because I hate to break it to everybody, but Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen are not filling that gap. For all of Brees Hall's flaws as an individual person and his personality and attitude, he's a very good football player. He's not generational. He's not McCaffrey. He's not those types of players, but you're not going to pay him that. Give him the transition tag and then try to work out a 2-year or a 3-year deal where it's 2 years guaranteed money. Again, he's 24 years old. To me, I'd give him like a 3-year deal, 2 years guaranteed, pay him $36 million, $24 million of it guaranteed, and then you're good. Like, that's what I would do. Because, first of all, he does have a point. He's been underutilized as a player, and he's been part of a losing, crappy team for many, many years now. But with that said, get him out of the backfield. Don't have him running through the line. That's not his strength. Use him in the passing game more. Get creative with Brees Hall. He's still probably, and I know people will argue with me that Garrett Wilson is your best offensive player. Garrett Wilson's a really good wide receiver. Brees Hall can actually change the game with what he does behind. He won the Jets, 2 games this year? So for me, I believe you bring Brees back. Transition tag him, try to work out a contract. Worst case scenario, he plays on the transition tag, and you trade him at the deadline if he's a pain in the ass and he's not working out. He's still, again, he's not 26, 27 years old. This isn't Saquon Barkley. None of that stuff is applicable. Like, we jump to these conclusions because we are frustrated with the player. I think the player needs to be used better. And I really would like to see them actually get him to stop with his bullshit online. Like, for Glenn, it's weird to me because he's got this authoritarian attitude. He does let some of this shit happen, which is surprising to me. I'd like to see them pull him aside, be like, look, Brees, you're the bell cow. You're going to touch the ball in the backfield. You're going to be the guy that touches the ball 70, 75% of the time as the running back. Okay? We're going to use you in the passing game. We are going to lean on you heavily. We're going to do a lot of RPO. We're going to have you in and running the outside and not running into the line of scrimmage, right? But I need you to play ball and be all in. Like, why can't we do that? I don't understand. Like, we're these extremes of get rid of him. Well, again, you could have gotten rid of him last year for a 4th-round pick. You chose not to, and now you're in this situation. Bring him back. That's just the way you got. To me, there's no world where you just let him walk. It's just, he's going to have a market for a reason. You don't think the Chiefs would love to have him? They would. The Chargers, there's plenty of teams that would use Hall the way he could be used. Again, he's not McCaffrey. He's not Barkley. But he is a good running back. He's a 1,000+ yard running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So if he cost you 3 years, $36 million, 2 of those guaranteed, when you have, I don't know if anybody's looked, the 2027 cap room for the Jets is going to be exorbitant. You can sign him. It's no big deal. I mean, we're hemming and hawing over this, and we're paying how much money in dead money to quarterbacks that aren't going to play this year. So that's just my view on Brees Hall. And yeah, Curtis, I agree. How about the idea of rejuvenation? Oh, with replacing Hall. I'm just not there. If you tell me if he says to you, I have no desire to play and he's being an ass, then yeah, maybe you've got to do something. But I'm very strongly in the camp of you bring him back, and if he works out, great. If not, you could always trade him at the deadline. That's just where I feel about him. And then as far as free agency goes, and then we'll probably end it here. I want to see the Jets active and aggressive. I don't want to see them stupid. And active and aggressive is building this team with guys that are not overly expensive, but are depth pieces or potential starters, not superstars, who can make a difference and have the right attitude and the kind of mindset you need to freaking change your franchise. Okay. The Jets are not in a place right now, in my mind, to go and swing big on a wide receiver. I saw people talk about Lindenbaum. I think he's going to wind up at the Giants personally, but are you going to pay him $20+ million a year as a center? I mean, I get it. I don't know. Like, I'd rather try and get like a Connor Lew in the draft, right? I think that you're in a place right now where the best way to build this team is get your superstars in the draft that are going to be under contract and under control. Between this year and next year, find your QB1 in the draft, because I don't think you're going to find it in any of these other names. Stabilize the franchise, stop being the laughing stock. And then your 2027 free agency, when you got a lot of money freed up, then you can go and pull what the Patriots did. The Jets should model what the Patriots did. It would actually, and I hate to say it, but you got to give credit where credit's due. The Patriots went crazy in free agency this past year, right? They signed a ton of guys. They built that roster out. But you know what? They knew they had the quarterback. So they said, we're good. We're going to go do it. They had the coach. They had the coaching staff. They felt really good about it. And we could argue that their schedule was a joke and all this other stuff. They still went to the Super Bowl. I mean, you'd give your left arm for that as a Jet fan. So to me, it would make sense for the Jets to treat this similarly. Build the team around the concept of what you want at quarterback. If Aaron Glenn survives through year 2, get your quarterback in 2027 in the draft. Okay? Because you're not getting Mendoza, and I don't want Ty Simpson. Sorry. And maybe you get lucky and one of these guys that we talked about earlier becomes the guy like a Brock Purdy did, but I don't think it will happen that way. But take your swing. Do the right thing, and you now have long-term sustainable success. Because you've got all these guys on you have a younger team on rookie contracts supplemented with free agency. So, I remember, I'll go back to when they hired Aaron Glenn. I said he probably needs 3 years unless it's a disaster. Now, unfortunately, last year was borderline disaster, but he got year 2. If he wins 6 games this year, he should get year 3 most likely. Okay? But between now and 2027, I want to find the quarterback in the draft. I don't believe Will Levis is QB1 of the future. I don't. I think Malik Willis is going to wind up in Miami or Arizona, maybe even Cleveland for that matter, although Cleveland's got a ton of money tied up with Deshaun Watson still. I think the best situation for Ty Simpson is to go to the Rams. And, I think the Jets are going to be playing it's not going to be a good year. It'll be look, the over-unders came out today. They're 5.5. A lot of people are going to bet the under on that. Say they're a 4-win team, 5-win team. I don't think you can do that until we see what happens. But I think 5.5 is fair. I think if they're under 5.5, I think Glenn is gone. And I think we're rebuilding. I don't know if Muji makes it through that or not. And I think if they win 6 or 7, he's here. That's what I think. Because they go from 3 wins to 6 wins, you double their win total. Objectively, the defense is probably better. And if you've done a decent job with your offensive staff, which I think they have, you're a quarterback away from being decent and competing. So I think that's what we'll likely see. But I don't know. We'll see, and we'll leave with this. Let's see. For Brees, Chris, transition tag of 11.7 million might make more sense than using franchise tag 4.5, especially with several starting caliber running backs eligible for free agency with Brees. I agree. I would use a transition tag. It gives you first right of refusal. And I don't think he's getting much more. I'm in the mindset 3 years, 36 million for Brees, 2 of those years guaranteed. I like that. But we'll see, right? But anyway, that's, I appreciate you guys joining today. We had our first live, which was a lot of fun. I appreciate all the feedback, commentary. I'm going to try and do this on a pretty regular basis. I don't know if it's going to be every Wednesday evening, but we'll see. But probably pop on for like an hour and see what happens. We've got the combine coming up, which will be a lot of will be fun and interesting. There'll be guys that move up because of their, how they look in the underwear Olympics. And again, like I said at the very beginning, there are going to be guys that Jets get tied to over and over and over again because this is rumor mill season. What actually happens will be interesting. It'll all be very fascinating. But again, as long as you don't compromise the 2027 capital that you've created in the draft, I think we're in a decent place. It's not going to be a good year this year. Don't worry about it. Just kind of go with the flow. But let's hope it's not a disaster. And, for those of you who are a tanker, if it's a disaster, you're going to get your number 1 pick. You might get Arch if that's what you want. That might work out. But I'm in the position right now of if you are a a 6-7 win team and Glenn is back and you're drafting at, anywhere between 7 to 14 and you've got 3 first rounders, you absolutely unequivocally will be able to find your quarterback in the 2027 draft. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining. Have a great night and let's go Jets. Talk to you soon.